Hello and welcome to the Dance Yourself Brave show, where we get real about the struggles dancers face, from confidence battles to self-doubt, and how dance has the power to make us braver, stronger, and more unstoppable in every area of life. I'm your host, Mariana Santos, founder of Brazili Fitness. And whether you're a seasoned dancer, a dance instructor, dance lover, or someone who's always wanted to dance but feels a little intimidated to start, this show is for you. Expect honest conversations, inspiring stories, and simple ways to bring more dance into your life, whether that's in the studio, on stage, or right in your living room. And if you're a dance instructor, we've got you covered with tips on how to grow your dance business, attract more students, and create a bigger impact through your passion for movement. So if you're ready to step out of your comfort zone, own your movement, and dance yourself brave, let's do this. Hello and welcome to the Dance Yourself Brave show. I'm your host, Mariana Santos, founder of Brazili Fitness. And once again, I have an amazing guest for you today. We have Hannah Batiste, who has been a dance and theater instructor, choreographer, and judge for 10 years. She lives in Washington with her husband and cat, and she's here to share all about her journey. Thank you so much, Hannah, for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, I want to start from the beginning because I think that it's so important to hear the backstory, right? Sometimes we see people like, okay, 10-year career in dance. We have this habit of thinking like, oh, must have been easy for her. She's a judge. She's so far advanced. I can never get there. But let's rewind and talk about how you got started with dance. Tell us from the beginning. Tell us all about you and how you got started with dance.
Yeah, sure. I was 3 years old when I started dance. My mom had I was an only child, and my mom had just kind of signed me up for ballet because I wasn't in school yet. So she kind of just did it as a way for me to like meet other kids since, I didn't have any siblings at home. Literally just kind of snowballed from that. Just every year, like she kept asking me like, oh, do you want to take dance again this year? You know, kept taking dance every year after that. Eventually, I started getting into middle school, high school. I started going out for dance competition team and then the musicals in high school, and then went on to continue it in college. I just really fell in love with it and I never really looked back. And it got to a point where I was in college, I was getting ready to graduate and start my life. Yeah, it was just never forced on me. It was just something that I always want to have in my life, no matter what. Eventually, after graduating college, that's when I started teaching dance. From there, I kind of started out as a dance teacher assistant, like worked my way up. The more I learned about like the teaching aspect, because I had the dance knowledge, but I learned about teaching and eventually just worked my way up, like worked for dance studios, like started to take on bigger roles as I got more knowledge of the education aspect, choreographer for kids productions, started, branching out into judging, etc. And that's kind of how I ended up here.
That's so awesome that, like, at such a young age, like that passion was like ignited within you and you just stuck with it. So I'm sure that you thank your mom all the time, right? Thanks, mom, for putting me in classes when I was 3.
I do. Yeah, and it's funny. I don't think me or my mom or my dad, I don't think we ever really expected for it to go that way, but yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah,
great.
especially too, like being on the other side and seeing the financial aspects, like as an adult, I'm like, thank you for,
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
sacrifice that you made.
that is true. Yeah, and I have a daughter and she's 4, so I definitely want to put her in dance lessons, but we're working on that for next year because she just started kindergarten and there's a lot of stuff going
Yeah.
on. But yeah, like I think that she loves to dance because my husband and I, like, we always dance together. Like, but so she's always like, I have videos of me when I was pregnant and she's dancing in my belly.
Aw.
But yeah, I would love to get her into some formal classes because I never had that opportunity as a kid. And I think
Yeah.
that it's so, like, it teaches, discipline and resiliency and, like, confidence at such a young age, right? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
think
for
it would
sure.
be amazing. I think it's amazing for any child. So, but why don't we touch on that a little bit? So, like, the struggles. you most likely, you gravitated towards dance pretty naturally, but I'm sure that doesn't mean that it was like just a clear path, easy breezy, right? Let's talk about maybe some struggles that you faced along the way.
Yeah, sure. I don't really know if this is necessarily a struggle, but something that I did kind of sit and question myself at some point is, do I really want to keep doing this, or is it has been just kind of like muscle memory to me? So that was, I wouldn't really say it was a huge struggle necessarily, because my choice was always pretty clear. The answer's always been yes. Like, I still very much want this to be a part of my life, but I think just getting to that place where it's like I'm an adult now, I'm the one making all of my own decisions, and I don't really have necessarily that authority who's gonna go and do it for me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I know that dance can be very demanding, right? In terms of nailing technique and things like that. Tell us, maybe
Yeah.
or like dealing with like comparing yourself to other people in the class or wanting to get solo and not getting it or like auditions and things like that. Like, did you ever go through anything like that where, your resilience was tested?
Well, for sure. Probably my biggest like obstacle physically was I was born with a condition called Erb's palsy. I don't know if it's very common. I've never met anybody else with that, but basically what it means is my arm was paralyzed when I was born. I was in a sling for the first couple months of my life. I got a little bit of physical therapy when I was a baby, so, as far as, all of the, disabilities in the world, I consider myself very lucky. But it's something I've lived with my whole life. My arm, it doesn't straight it's hard to explain like kind of over an audio podcast, but it doesn't straighten out completely. It's kind of like permanently bent a little bit. I don't
Okay.
have full range of movement in my arm. Therefore, in the dance world, I could never really like fully raise my arm or move my left arm as much as my right arm. And especially, I mean, I'm showing my age here, but growing up in the 90s, early 2000s, I feel like disabilities in general weren't really, talked about as much as they are now. And I'm happy that times are changing, maybe for future dancers like me. But yeah, at that time, it wasn't really something that people were super aware of. And I was lucky I did have some dance teachers that were understanding, but for the most part, growing up in that time, it was kind of like, well, this is what we're doing, and you're going to put your left arm up. So I think too, that translates really heavily into comparing myself to other dancers. And, it was kind of one of those things where I had to work twice as hard, three times as hard just to either be as good or even still not be as good as everybody else on the team. I was always, super self conscious about just physically not being able to do everything. Yeah, it, kind of really tested my resilience at times. And especially when you're like really young and you're growing up with something like that, you don't really have a full understanding of why did this happen to me, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
So,
hard to understand at that age for sure. Yeah, but I think that's amazing that, like you said, you had to work, twice as hard, three times as hard to compare yourself to other people or like to match up. And I'm
yeah,
sure that that has, developed your work ethic and things like that. So there's always a little bit of a reason why we're going through things and it's
yeah,
teaching us something
absolutely.
along the way, right? So going through all of that, this whole like process with dance, how do you think it's shaped you as a person and how has it affected your overall life?
Definitely. I mean, like I said, it's definitely taught me so much resistance, and especially the art of not comparing yourself to other people. This was something that I really didn't fully realize and discover until I was an adult. Kind of just realizing, we all have challenges. They're all different challenges, and no matter how minor or major your challenge is, it's all valid at the end of the day. And it's your personal journey, and it's different, and it's going to look different for everybody else.
Mhm.
And on the teaching aspect, I feel like it's just elevated my level of compassion, especially teaching young kids. I've never met, a student who has exactly the same condition as me, but, even just meeting, students from all different circumstances, all different, challenges and whatnot, it's just made me a more like empathetic and understanding teacher.
Yeah, I'm 100% sure that's true because as a teacher, I think that's the first thing you need to know how to do is like empathize, right? Put yourself into
Mhm.
your
Yeah.
students' shoes. And if you were, let's say you didn't have any of those limitations and dance just came super easy for you and you had no challenges along the way, you might think that it would be that way for all your students, right? And that's just not the case. So I'm sure
Yeah,
that's you
exactly.
compassion and empathy, not only as a teacher, but even in your life with your relationships and friendships and all of that, right? And that's such an important thing because I feel like we're living in a world where compassion and empathy are a little bit rare to find, right, these days. So, like, there's some traits that we
Yeah,
all
oh, for sure.
so I think that that's something that will stick with you for sure, like for forever, and it's super important. So what would be something that maybe you can share that maybe something that your students don't know about you, something you wish that they knew about you, or like a surprising fact, something that they'd be surprised to know about?
The thing that I think I really struggled to understand, or like I just did not realize as a student, which now I would love for my students understand this, is just how much I'm in their corner and how much I want them to succeed. I feel like as a student myself, like that was just something that I never realized when you're getting all of those critiques. And yeah, sometimes they're a little bit harsh, and sometimes you have to get the same critique more than one time over and over. On the teacher end of it, it's like I really hope that they know and they understand how much I'm rooting for them. If I didn't care, I wouldn't be giving those critiques. It's because we want you to succeed. We are celebrating your successes right there with you.
Yes. Well, actually, that leads into my next question. So, I'm sure you have a ton of student success stories, but how about you share one, maybe one recent or one that stands out to you the most, like a student success story that just something that always kind of sits in your heart that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, yes. I think too, it's funny. It feels like it was so recent, but it was a couple years ago. For the past like several years, I've worked on a lot of like full length children's musical theater productions, and so the world of children's theater, I feel like it's so different from like the dance studio. When I would teach at like recreational competitive dance studios, a lot of those kids have been taking ballet since they were 3. But in children's theater world, it's you might get a couple students who haven't had that lifetime dance experience yet. So it's new to a lot of them. It's a lot of foundational, musical theater basics teaching. And I specifically had kind of a small knit group within our production. They were kind of the lead roles, minor lead roles. It was a small group of them. They were all very close. They're very good friends. And they were late elementary, early middle school age. And kind of just seeing like their growth over a few months of progress, seeing them like not only adapt to the challenges, but really rise. And just by the end of the production, I was like, you guys aren't just singers and actors. I was like, you guys are really dancers. And just seeing that growth within a few months and just to see their love of coming to dance rehearsal and really having fun with it, because that's the most important part of doing theater when you're a kid. Um, just seeing that like love and growth like really just exponentially grow over a few months, it was so rewarding, and yeah, even a couple years later, it's a production I really look back on so fondly.
Oh, I love that. And
Yeah.
what's so great about that is that there's so much talk these days about how kids they're so into their phones and video games and
Mhm.
technology and they're not playing outside or they're not, like interested in sports and it goes to show if they have the right teacher, the right support system, the right community like they can have so much fun and they can grow and they can make friends and step away from their phone for a while. And as parents, especially, we have to kind of guide them in the right direction and listen to what's calling them, right? Because sometimes we don't take what they say as seriously. So if a kid says, "Oh, I'm interested in theater," and you're like, oh, "Okay, that's just a phase. You'll get over it." Like, no, even if it is just a phase, let them live that phase. And it's and that's the time you should be exploring as a kid, right? Finding feel alive, right? So as parents, just honing into that their creative side and letting them explore these new things, because that will get them away from their phones and that will teach them, like we were talking about, discipline, resiliency, and all of that stuff. But we have to put them on that right path. So
Especially with the arts, it's in particular when your kid tells you like, "Oh yeah, I want to like take an art class, I want to do theater." I feel like it's so easy just to kind of like look at it and be like, "Oh, are you really going to do this for the rest of your life?" But I think that's something like I wish a lot of parents would realize. It's even if they don't go and perform on Broadway or become a teacher or whatever, those are experiences that are going to shape the rest of their lives, and it's going to be a core memory for their childhood. Yeah. And I mean, even too with that particular production, I had a girl, I overheard her telling people in the cast one time, she's like, "Oh yeah, these rehearsals in this place, this is my happy place." And like, yeah, I get sad when I come home from school and I don't have rehearsal that day.
those, that's just,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
priceless. There's nothing better than
Hmm.
that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Even if they don't become a well-known artist, or it's still very much worth the investment.
Yeah, and not only that, it's what I always say is that dance teaches you life skills, right? We talked about the confidence, the resilience. So I view dance, especially because I'm more of a dance fitness background, right? So I view it more as, mostly people who come to my classes, they're adults. Maybe they've never danced before. But by you committing to yourself and to doing something new and getting outside of your comfort zone and, keeping up that consistency and aiming for a little bit growth, like week after week, class after class, that's going to help you no matter what you're looking to achieve in life. So it's not about
Hmm.
just like going down that dance career. It's like, how can that help you chase your dreams, right? Because whatever that dream is, you're going to need what? Resiliency. You're going to need confidence. You're going to need to be proactive. You're going to need to be resourceful. And these are all things that dance can teach you, right? And that's why I encourage
Yeah,
dance at any
absolutely.
age, because I firmly believe that each and every one of us were put on this planet with a purpose, like a mission that we're meant to fulfill. And sometimes like we hear that little voice and it seems so big and scary, and we just put it off. We put it off, and then that voice gets a little bit louder. And but if we do something that's a little bit smaller that builds our confidence, all of a sudden that big dream doesn't seem so scary anymore, right? So that's what I
Hmm.
want people to realize, that dance can help you chase your dreams and live a life with more fulfillment and joy and happiness. But you have to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone and be okay a beginner and like not getting it all down like right away.
Hmm. Exactly. And yeah, just like the life skills that you mentioned, I feel like that is so overlooked with like theater, especially. I've always done dance and theater education like as part-time, but it hasn't always been my full-time job. But even those life skills I learned from having to put myself out there and, do a monologue or do a dance solo in front of people, it's carried on into every single career I've ever had. If I can go on a quick tangent,
Of
years
course,
ago,
this is your
but
face.
but yeah, years ago, I worked in animal cruelty investigations for a while, which, is really the complete opposite of working in dance or theater. But even in that career, you know, we would have these projects sometimes where we did videos of like, hey, this is like kind of what, the the investigators, this is kind of what we see on a daily basis. This is what your donation can, help. For all of those videos, who were they asking but the theater kid who has like those public speaking skills to like she's totally comfortable on video and she's comfortable talking in front of people. So
And
it's
that's
like,
a
yeah.
major thing. Like I don't know if you were like this, but as a teenager, like a
like a preteen, teen, like when we had any kind of public speaking assignment, that was like the worst news I could get. Like I hated speaking in front of people. It was so intimidating, right? I felt like everyone was gonna be waiting for me to mess something up. And now that I've been teaching dance fitness for like 20 years. Now I've been presenting at fitness conventions. I started a podcast, like I have all these things, and I'm like, wow, like this is all because I took a chance on myself and I started dancing, right? Because it teaches you, like, it's not like, oh, overnight all of a sudden I'm like this super confident person. No, it's just like day by day, tiny steps, and that's how we get anywhere in life, right? Just little small steps, like in the right direction, and then before you know it, you're like, you look back in your journey, you're like, wait a second, I speak in front of people now, and that's not a big deal, so it's really
Yeah,
cool
exactly.
to look back at that. And I'm sure that the way that you speak in front of people, I'm sure that comes from your background, right? And people notice it in all areas, even when you're working with something completely different, right?
But yeah, for sure. I can credit a lot of that to dance and theater.
Yes, it teaches you to perform no matter what situation is needed, right? I
It
love
really
it.
does. Yeah.
So, what would you say is the kind of impact that you're making in the world right now? What's your ultimate goal? Like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
This is going to sound a little corny, but I'll elaborate more on this. But just fully embrace who you are, no matter what that is. Especially, in the TikTok era, I
Mhm.
think it's so easy. And I mean, I've been guilty of this too. Like, it's so easy to look at people, on social media or in your real life or wherever and be like, oh, wow, like I need to be like that. Like, and this is going to sound like such a silly comparison, but in my early 20s, I hate running. I am not a runner. I will never be a runner.
Here.
In middle school.
Same here. You can have me
Yeah.
dancing for hours on end, but like if I have to run for 5 minutes, that's like the ultimate torture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm the same exact way. In middle school, we had to like run the mile test. I would always walk it. I would always finish last. I'm just never going to be a runner. And I feel like I got into this like cycle in my early 20s, where like I felt like I had to like go for a run, like to like stay in shape and, look good and feel good. And I would like force myself to like go for a run. And I mean, I was in my early 20s. I was in probably the best shape of my life. I didn't need to go running every day. And I forced myself and like I could never run for more than 10 minutes. Most of that was walking. But it's like I hated doing that and I forced myself to do it because I saw all these other people doing it and thought that I needed to do it. Whereas, I can go for an hour walk every day and feel amazing and love it. But I feel like that really ties into kind of the point I'm trying to make. Just enjoy your stuff and enjoy your life and don't worry about it, looking similar to everybody else. Something as big as a career or something as small as a hobby. I have actually a friend who's, super into cross stitch and sewing right now. And I kind of, I kind of like tried to, I was like, oh, maybe I could do this. And I, after a while, I was like, I don't really, feel the same kind of passion. But,
And that's
there's tons of
okay.
other things.
Yes.
Yeah, there's tons of other things that I enjoy doing. And, in my career and in my personal life, it's gonna look different for everyone else. So I think too, I hope when people, look at me and look at my life, that's what they see. And maybe they take, especially to being a teacher, maybe they take something away from that, like I really enjoy doing this. I don't really know anybody else that enjoys it, but like it's something I love to do. So, therefore I'm gonna enjoy it and embrace it.
In itself is inspirational, right? Because how many people out there are working careers and jobs that they absolutely hate and they can't wait till it's Friday so they can go home and start the weekend, and then, Monday morning they wake up and like, oh my God, here we go again. And that's, I think, what we should try to avoid, right? And somehow we've normalized that, right? Like a job is just something to pay the bills. Like you don't have to necessarily like it. Well, I'm here to say that I don't think that's true. Like, I think that that is something that's leading to a lot of mental health issues, right? Because people are just like, we spend most of our lives working. So if you don't enjoy that in some way, or if you don't like the people that you're working with and you don't feel inspired, like to wake up every day and to go to work, of course you're not going to be happy. Like, how is that not going to affect your life in a negative way, right? So just, getting people to live out what is calling them, even if it is just like a side thing, right? Maybe keep your job for now, but find a way to have like a side hustle or something that makes you feel alive, that just makes you feel like life is worth living. And I think that the fact that you are showing that like to your students, like, look, I'm doing this because I love it. I'm not doing this because for the paycheck, right? I'm doing this because this is what I meant to do. I think that is something that we need to showcase more.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say too, it's like the time in my life where I was making the most money and I was like I the and I was working the most, I was like the most unhappy, you know? So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, we'll never buy happiness. And
Yeah.
life is too short. You're not going to look back on your life and be like, oh, I made this much money this month. And, you're going to remember, like, the impact that you had in your students' lives. And, like, when they come running up to you and be like, oh, I was able to do this, or you inspired me this way. Like, I'm sure that that is going to be, like, what you're going to hang on to. Like, those are going to be the memories that when you're no longer teaching, like, and you're just looking back on your life, I think that's what's gonna always be there. And I think that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
so what would you say is something that the world needs more of nowadays? So, in this crazy, crazy world, what's one or two things that you think that we could just add more of that would make a difference?
It really might sound a little silly, but I think the world needs more like play right now. Kind of what we touched on earlier. Just learn to enjoy like what makes you happy and not worrying about what makes everybody else happy in a time where I feel like we see people, like monetizing everything and hustling at everything, and which is like yeah, this is not me like criticizing, people who do that. I pivoted from to, being a teacher and choreographer full time. So, but I feel like it's so easy to look at people who are like, oh, like, this person opened a bakery and like this person opened plant shop. If I'm going to pick up this hobby, I have to make it worthwhile. Like I have to like sell all these candles just kind of like, I feel like we're very much in a time where we kind of feel like we have to monetize everything. And I feel like the world just needs just more having fun
Hmm.
and not taking it so seriously. If especially when you're just starting out a hobby, if you've wanted to open your own bakery your whole life, that's what you want to do, like I think that's something completely different.
Yeah.
I'm not criticizing people, who make small businesses out of their hobbies. Like, I think that's a completely different subject. But yeah, I think, when you're picking up like a hobby or an interest for the first time, just learning to enjoy it for yourself. And if you want to open up that Etsy shop along like a few years down the line and sell candles and make a full-time income out of that, I think that's also really admirable and really great. But yeah, I think the world just needs more like just doing things for yourself, making that thing, like making that crochet project just for yourself. You're not making money off of it. You're not on any kind of deadline to do it for somebody else. You're just enjoying doing it for you. And yeah, I think that can really be applied to, any hobby and anything in life, really.
Yes, I love that. And actually, so like I don't know if you know much about my business, so it's called Brazili Fitness, and it's all based on the Brazilian lifestyle. And our flagship program is the Brazili dance program. But when I moved to Brazil as a teenager, like one of the things that I realized is that there's so much more play. Like there's so much more
Yeah.
spontaneity. And I feel like here, I'm in Canada, But I think in the US it's similar, where it's like, especially
Uh-huh.
now as a mom, right? It's like you want to meet up with a friend. It's like, well, let me check my calendar. I'm free 4 weeks from now. Are you free that day? And then
Yeah.
it's back and forth. And my husband is Brazilian. I met him when I lived in Brazil, and I remember in the beginning, he would like get home, we'd be like, oh, by the way, I invited so and so to come over for lunch today. And I'd be like, what? Like, we have no food, the house is a mess. Like, and I would get so mad at him. But and then I started to realize like those were always the best days. Like they were always like the people who came, they didn't care that, our house was a mess. They helped us make the food. And then, those are always the best memories, right? And then you start to attract the people who are meant to be in your life, right? Because if a friend of yours is going to go into your house and judge you, then that's probably not a good friend anyway, right? So like when
Yeah,
you're more
exactly.
spontaneous, right? You start to attract the right people. And so it's just like when you were talking, it reminded me of that because like in Brazil, they always say like Brazilians need to be studied because they're so
I love that.
creative and like, the world can be like burning down, but they're still dancing and like having fun. But yeah, like more play and just like not taking things so seriously, like have fun. And yeah, I love that. I think that the world definitely needs more of that.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny too. I feel that way about Europe. Like every time I go over there, I know I'm on vacation now, and it probably feels different,
Mhm.
when you're like living a life and, not on vacation, but I'm just like, oh man, I'm like, we need to live like, other parts of the world.
I agree. Like I lived in Brazil for the first time 3 years, and then when I went back the second time 6 years. And the second time I went and I worked, and it was a grind. But I lived close to the beach and and things like that, so it was different for sure.
Yeah.
And I definitely miss it. Obviously, there are pros and cons, and there are reasons I came back to Canada. But I'm never gonna forget that time, and that's why through my company, I'm aiming to just bring some of that vibe through our programs across the globe,
Mhm.
right? Because no matter where you are, you can live that, right? You just have to find the right people, find the right
Yeah.
tribe, and just kind of let loose and just let life flow the way it's meant to. So,
Yeah, yeah,
what
absolutely.
advice would you give to someone who's just starting to dance or like a little bit curious about dance? And like, let's keep in mind that, people who are listening to this show, most likely, they're not 4 years old, right? So maybe
Yeah.
as we get older, we tend to become more fearful and we lose, courage to try new things, right? As kids, we're just like, oh yeah, I'll try this and no big deal if I don't get it, right? As adults, like it's a little bit trickier. We're always second guessing ourselves. So what kind of advice would you offer to someone who is interested in dance, but they're just like, it's a little intimidating.
Yeah. I think too, I've heard this analogy before and I absolutely love it. It's when you start out as a freshman in high school, it's don't compare yourself to a senior in college. So it's kind of when you start anything, it's like you're kind of at that freshman year of high school level. And yeah, as you progress, you're going to be like sophomore, junior, senior, and then college freshman, etc. And I think that's such a really good analogy because I feel like, yeah, like when we start out at something, we always look at people, who have been doing this for years. And no matter what it is, it's like, oh my God, like they're so good at this. They do it so effortlessly. And I feel like we kind of fail to remember they've been doing this for years. Like you do something every day for years, even I'm guilty of that. I mean, I've been in this industry quite literally since I was 3 years old in some capacity or another. It's so easy for me to look at, other teachers and judges who are 20 years older than me, who therefore probably have 20, 10 extra years of experience above me. I've done that so many times where I've kind of been the small fish in a big pond, and I'm looking at these people who are 20, 30 years older than me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? Dance, especially, is such like a technique heavy level thing. So I feel like, especially when you're starting out in dance, you're in your freshman year of high school. Don't look at somebody who is in their college years and don't compare yourself to them because they started out at the same point that you're starting out. Sometimes our journey just looks differently. Like some of us start things later in life, and that's okay. Just don't compare yourself, to somebody who has been doing this for years. Because if you stick with it and if you don't let that affect you, eventually you're going to be that person, years down the line. who might be giving this piece of advice to somebody starting out.
Exactly. And inspiring someone else, right? And, at that point, you have
Mhm.
someone else maybe that comes to your class and they look at you like, wow, I want to be there. And, like maybe it's hard for you to imagine yourself getting to that point, but it's totally possible as long as you believe in yourself and you have the right support system, you're doing what you love, you're having fun with it. There's no limits to what you can achieve, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love this chat, and I'm sure that people want to hear more about you and how they can get in touch with you. So why don't you share all there is to know, like where they can find classes with you, how they can reach out on socials, share all of that with us.
I work kind of on a freelance level basis, so I kind of, pick up like short-term projects with, different schools and theaters and whatnot. So I don't really have like a consistent weekly classes right now. But yeah, as far as socials, I don't really go on Instagram that much anymore, but you kind of post, what I'm up to, what I've been doing. My handle is Hannah spelled backwards 0.
Okay.
And I do have a website kind of, just with like projects and a resume and kind of work that I'm available for. It's kind of long. It's a Google site. It's kind of a long and complicated URL, but if you
The
Google,
show notes, don't
okay, awesome. Thank you.
be if people could just click.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I love hearing about your story and, the amazing things that you're doing, inspiring people. And I just hope that you keep doing it for as long as possible. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
Well, thank you for listening to this show or watching on YouTube. We're so grateful that you're here. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel if this is the first time that you're here. Leave a quick review because that's the best way for other people to find out about our show and we can all come together and share the dance love across the globe. Thank you so much for tuning in and we'll chat next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Dance Yourself Brave show. If today's episode got you hyped, inspired, or just made you want to bust a move, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear today's message. Sharing is caring after all. And hey, don't forget, your courage is already in you. Sometimes you just gotta dance it out to feel it. Catch you next time, keep shining and keep dancing yourself brave.